Welcome back to the Truth Factory. The recent media exposure of the NXIVM cult and Jeffrey Epstein's crimes have begun to shed light in the mainstream on the clandestine organizations operating within our society that prey upon minors. But decades before these stories broke headlines, there was another similarly devious and mysterious group in the 1980s known as the Finders Cult. It's been suggested that this was a satanic child trafficking network possibly tied to and protected by the CIA, and to this day there are still far more questions than answers about the Finders. The information that I'm about to share with you in this video is not a wacky conspiracy theory. All of this comes directly from the pages of police reports, newly released FBI files, and accounts taken from witnesses, investigators, and members of the cult themselves. But as a warning, this story is very disturbing. Let's begin. In the afternoon of February 4th, 1987, the Tallahassee Police Department responded to an anonymous tip that two well-dressed men driving a blue van were spotted at a local park escorting 6 disheveled-looking children. According to a witness, the men, who were potentially high on drugs, were looking for a park with a swimming pond to bathe the visibly filthy children. The children, 2 girls and 4 boys ranging in ages from 2 to 6 years old, were very dirty and unkempt, with bug bites on their entire body and scratches on their legs. When police arrived, the men Michael Hallwell and Douglas Ammerman claimed to be teachers traveling to Mexico to start a school for brilliant children. When they were asked about the parents of the children, Ammerman became very evasive and stated that the children's parents were in D.C. Hallwell refused to give any information and then pretended to faint when he was told that he was under arrest for child abuse due to neglect. He also later laid down in his holding cell, just jerking his body and refusing to open his eyes. Hallwell also had with him 2 copies of Miranda rights forms, one of which stated, "I have nothing to hide," and the other with, "I have something to hide." According to the New York Times, witnesses told investigators that they had seen 2 other men and children in a second van make contact with the first group in the park, but that they had driven away before the police arrived.
It was just 2 of you?
No, there were actually the 2 of us who were arrested, plus a second van with 3 or 4 other men from the Finders. So there were actually 2 vans traveling together. The other 3 or 4 men were in Tallahassee looking for work, while Danny and I were on a camping trip with the kids, because the idea was to have the kids be in nature. So we were in some kind of a state park outside of Tallahassee, and living kind of this kind of babysitting. Babysitting I believe there
6 kids you had, is what they said.
Yeah, there was Mary and Max and Ben and BB and Honeybee and John Paul. My son was the youngest.
By the next morning, the Tallahassee police confirmed that the men were a part of a group called the Finders. U.S. District Court records described them as a Washington-based cult that conducted brainwashing techniques at a warehouse in D.C. A source talks about being recruited by the cult with promises of sexual gratification and financial reward, and was invited by one member to explore Satanism with them. On police inspection of a men's foul-smelling blue van, the police find knives, a Chinese-English dictionary, a U.S. passport, a pack of Trojan condoms, a bag containing photos of children, some nude, as well as 20 floppy disks, a TRS-80 computer, and a device that could be hooked into a telephone line for computer transmission. It's important to note that this was all, of course, prior to the internet, and at the time it was still fairly uncommon for even private citizens to own a computer, let alone numerous ones in other state-of-the-art technologies. The system was used by the cult leader Marion Petty to give various missions to the traveling members to carry out, which were known to the group as games. This is why Marion Petty went by the alias, the Game Caller. One of the messages allegedly told the men to use the Mexican school cover story if caught by the police. Although obviously if you need a cover story or are afraid of being caught by the police, it's probably because you're engaging in illegal activities. After the police had placed the children in custody, they received half a dozen calls threatening the children, including a bomb threat. At this point, the children had been moved to an undisclosed location and placed under the watch of an armed guard for their protection. According to reports, the children urinated and defecated on the floor during the police interviews, and they were all extremely hungry. One of the girls claimed that they only ate raw food and that food was only given to them as a reward. The children also appeared to be unaware of basic household innovations like television, telephones, hot water, electricity, and even toilets, which is a stark contrast to the adult members' use of high-tech equipment. Included in the Virginia affidavit were statements from the children made to the Tallahassee authorities. The oldest child, Mary, stated, "Mr. Petty tells everyone what to do. He is in charge. The children are made to sleep outside of the house, and the moms are allowed to sleep inside the house. Men come and visit the moms, and they sleep inside also." Mary also stated that the children were guarded at night and that Mr. Petty is fat and owns a man named Steve. Mary went on to claim that they were being weaned from their mothers and that the two men, Hollowell and Ammerman, teach them games and how to read. When asked what kind of games they play, the children described one game as taking off the man's clothes, putting them on, and then going through the pockets for money. Mary claimed that at Christmas time, the women had come down the stairs with no clothes on, and the children believed that this was another game. When Mary was questioned about sexual abuse, she became very evasive and fidgety. She said there were, quote, "no bad touches between the children and adults." However, an official with the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services reported that the two children were confirmed cases of sexual abuse based on physical examination.
Nonsense. The two oldest children were Mary and Max, and they would make stuff up, make up stories. Probably trying to get sympathy so they could get some candy.
Also, something odd is that one of the young boys, Max, stated that everything they had belonged to Mr. Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was the president at this time, and I'm unsure if this was a reference to him, but the Finders spokesman, Robert Gardner Terrell, did show up to a small press conference at the time wearing a Ronald Reagan mask. Whether that's relevant, I don't know, but it is weird. While all of this was happening, a police officer who was also a part-time student named Robert Sorkin found a computer at a phone booth at his university campus and decided to take it home. He figured out how to run it, and then he read the documents on it in hopes of determining the owner. It turns out that the computer was either accidentally or purposely left at the campus by other members of the Finders group, and the messages on it contained the names of the investigating officers on the Finders case. At this point, Tallahassee enforcement officials and U.S. Customs have deep suspicions that the children could likely have been kidnapped with an attempt to traffic them across the border. So they contact the D.C. police, who are already well aware of the Finders, as they have already been investigating them for almost a year, after an informant had given them information regarding a cult that engaged in blood rituals and sexual orgies involving children. One witness says that she was given a room by the Finders, and during the night she was summoned to the attic by one female member of the cult for purposes of engaging in sex with redacted. On another instance, she stated that she spent the night in the warehouse and was subjected to watching sexual intercourse between redacted and male members of the cult. It goes on to claim that when she tried to leave the cult, the members burned down her place of dwelling.